Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my full review of the FiiO, or maybe you say FiiO, but this is the K7 combination DAC and headphone amp. And I'm shooting this video at almost midnight on a Sunday night, and I've been trying to get to this for about a week and just been really busy. So a lot of you know I do lawn care, work by myself. I've been working by myself for about 10 years. So I, do the mowing, the string trimming, everything. And I've been trying to keep 16 yards mowed every week. And I think it's rained almost every day for the last 7 weeks straight. So just trying to keep up. It's been tough. And I've had 2 days off in the last 7 weeks, and both of those days I had to mow my yard that was like knee high by that point, and just been kind of neglecting the YouTube channel and the videos, and I apologize for that. And I want to say thank you to APOS Audio for being so patient with me. It's been a while since I did my first impressions on this. So anyway, this is my full review, the long overdue full review of the FiiO K7 combination DAC amp. This was loaned to me by APOS Audio for review, and there will be a link below this video that you can click on if you do wish to purchase this from APOS, and by doing so you will help this channel. I get a small affiliate fee, but it all adds up and helps support this channel. And yeah, I'm kind of in need of a new CD transport. I've been using the Cambridge Audio that I've had for about, probably 15 years now, and I think it's kind of on its last leg, and time to think about investing in a new CD transport. So any help you can give the channel will help with that. So anyway, yeah, all you got to do is click on the link. It won't add anything to your cost, but I will get a small commission from APOS. So this is currently priced at $209.99 in US dollars at APOS. And FiiO calls this a truly balanced DAC and amp. And it uses dual AKM DAC chips. They are the AK4493 SEQ, and I've got to admit that I seem to prefer AKM chips over Sabre chips. What do you call them? The EES Sabre chips. They just seem to have a little bit warmer sound, which I prefer, but it's not always the case, but it seems to be most of the time. Anyway, this also uses THX-AAA 788 Plus amps in it, which are the same that was used in the FiiO K9 Pro, which I reviewed a couple of years ago, which was one of the nicest DAC amps I've ever reviewed. It's rated at 2,000 milliwatts per channel at 32 ohms at less than 1% distortion, and 1% happens to be the threshold that very few people can hear distortion at 1%. So as long as it's lower than 1%, there's very little chance you're going to hear any distortion. But anyway, yeah, 2,000 milliwatts into 32 ohms, so plenty of power for almost any headphone, and I will talk about that go a little deeper into that in a few minutes. Anyway, this uses a volume potentiometer with 112 steps. It has 2 gain levels. It has 3 digital inputs, that would be USB, coaxial, and optical. It has 1 analog input, which is RCA single-ended. It has 3 analog outputs, that would be RCA single-ended on the rear, to use this as a preamp or a standalone DAC, and it also has a 6.3 millimeter headphone jack and a 4.4 millimeter balanced headphone jack on the front. I'll give you a closer look at that in a minute. The RCA outputs on the back of this can be used either with a fixed volume to use this as a standalone DAC, or by flipping a switch on the front, you can make it variable volume controlled by the volume knob on this unit to use this as a preamp. FiiO claims a signal to noise ratio of 128 decibels. And this, the entire unit is enclosed in aluminum. This is not plastic. It's a full aluminum body. The weight of this, and I guess I forgot to write down the dimensions, but you can see here it's probably about 6 inches front to back, about 2 inches tall, and probably about 4.5 inches wide. Not tiny, but definitely not huge. Ideal size for a desktop. Weighs in at 1.3 pounds, and that's without the power supply. And what this comes with is it comes with a USB cable. It comes with a headphone adapter from the 6.3 down to 3.5 millimeter. And then it comes with its DC power supply, which actually is 2 parts. You've got your cable or your power cord going from the wall to the power supply, and then the power supply itself, which is 12 volts DC, which runs to the back of your amp. And I guess I'll move in here a little bit and show you the front of this. And we'll start here at this side here. You've got your input button, which basically just toggles through your 4 inputs, and you've got little LED lights up here at the top, which will tell you whether you're in USB, optical, coax, or your line in, which is your analog input. Then the next switch here, just a little toggle switch, is your gain, low gain and high gain. And then this switch here is to switch from headphone output, or your rear output is either fixed volume or variable volume to use it as a preamp. And then you've got your volume knob, and I really like this volume knob because for a small unit, it's actually a really large volume knob. And you click it to turn it off. All the way to the left is like at about 7 o'clock is off, and then it clicks on. I do want to point out that you can click it on and off with your headphones on. There's absolutely no pop or any noise or distortion doing that. And then I also wanted to point out that the volume knob is non-linear, so it starts out really slow. It starts increasing at a real slow pace, and you got to be, you know, probably up to probably about 12 o'clock with even sensitive headphones to listen to it. But then once you get past like 12 o'clock, it starts ramping up the volume real fast. And even, you know, like medium hard to drive planar magnetics, you're going to be at like maybe about 1 o'clock on the volume knob. And then a real hard to drive planar magnetic like the Sesvara, you're going to be at a comfortable volume level at probably like 2 or 3 o'clock on this. But yeah, it really ramps up fast towards the end. What else? Let me show you the back of this. You've got your analog inputs here, and then to use this as an amp, if you want to use another DAC or something like that, or plug a CD player into it using the analog outputs of your CD player. Then you've got your analog outputs, which, like I said, you can use this as a standalone DAC, or you can use it as a preamp. Then you've got your 3 digital inputs, your coax, your optical, and your USB. And then you've got your 12 volt DC power input here that your power supply plugs into. I also want to point out that when this is plugged in, you can't see it right now, there's LED lights behind the volume knob that lights up and glows around it. And it is color coded to let you know your sampling rate. So, and I can't tell you what the colors are because if you don't know this already, I'm colorblind. I have a unusual form of color blindness where I can see different colors, but I can't identify them. I can look at a color and can't tell you what color it is unless it's one of the three primary colors, blue, yellow, or red. Other than that, I can't tell you if it's red or brown. I can't tell you if it's green or yellow. I can't tell you if it's pink or beige. I just can't look at a color and tell you what it is. But if you put two colors next to each other, I can see the differences, and I can even pass a colorblind test, the one where they give you a bunch of dots and you have to read the number or letter. Whatever. I can pass those, no problem, but can't identify colors. So anyway, I actually wanted to be an electrical engineer when I was younger and couldn't be because of that. So that's why I'm doing lawn care for a living at 60 years old. So anyway, but the color codes will tell you if your sampling rate is less than 48 kilohertz, more than 48 kilohertz, or if your input is DSD. But like I said, I can't tell you what the colors are because I just don't know. Anyway, so the equipment I used reviewing this, and I always like to mention that because sometimes reviewers will review something using really weird equipment or less than adequate equipment, and then, not have much good to say about the unit they're reviewing. And sometimes that's the problem. So I do like to always mention what equipment I'm using. So I use two different inputs on this. My input into the coaxial digital input was from my Cambridge Audio 540C CD player used as a transport, running a digital signal to this unit. And then I also used the USB input on this from my HP desktop computer, which is running Windows 10. I'm using Windows Media Player and using CDs that were ripped to the computer in WAV lossless format. And so those are the two methods of my inputs into this. So, and then as far as headphones, I used about a half a dozen Hi-Fi Man headphones reviewing this. And I probably used some other headphones, but I forget which ones. But just to show you the variety, I use the Hi-Fi Man Ananda Nano, the Hi-Fi Man Aria Organic, the Hi-Fi Man HE1000 SE, and I just want to mention it has plenty of power for any of those. Okay, and then I also tried the Hi-Fi Man HE6 SE version 2, which is extremely hard to drive, and the Hi-Fi Man Susvara, which is also extremely hard to drive, actually a little harder than the HE6. And I use those primarily to test the power output of this, what it's capable of. And I will talk about the results of that in a minute. So getting into the sound, okay, I would describe the tone balance of this as being slightly warm of neutral. It's just a little on the warm side and far enough to the warm side that it doesn't sound sterile, it doesn't sound overly analytic, even though the detail is very good. It doesn't sound dry. It's got a warm, slightly rich sound, right about where I like it, actually very enjoyable. This has excellent clarity and detail, both from the DAC and from the amp, and it sounds very clean and focused. Just very clear. Everything comes out very clear. It has a wide sound stage with good depth, and by good depth I mean for a Delta Sigma DAC. I've only heard a few Delta Sigma DACs that I would really consider to have more than good depth. Usually R2R DACs do have better depth to the sound stage, but that is my opinion, but I guess I'm entitled to my opinion. We all have one. So the sound is punchy and dynamic, and I told you I would talk about the power. This thing at 2 watts per channel into 32 ohms has plenty of power for any of the Hi-Fi Man planers, all the way up to the HE 1000 SE. Some of them of the lower models are higher or harder, but as far as the Ananda Nano, the Aria Organic, the HE 1000 SE, more than enough power. In fact, it does a decent job even on low gain with those headphones, but I thought it sounded a little more punchy, a little more dynamic on high gain, and that's what I used because there was no background hiss or anything like that. And that's usually how I decide which gain setting to use. I usually use the highest gain setting I can that doesn't cause any background hiss. And I'm talking about like silent parts between songs. If I can hear any background hiss at all, then I'll go to a lower gain setting. But by using a higher gain setting, if you can, without any background noise, you usually get a little bit more punchy sound. Or if I don't have enough volume control, you know, like just a little touch jumps the volume up a lot, then I'll drop to lower gain setting also, which gives you more volume control. But anyway, so I flipped this on to high gain and tried it with the HE6 SE version 2 from Hi-Fi Man and the Susvara. And I'm not going to say that this is the best amp for those two headphones, but it actually does a pretty respectable job. Both of those headphones, if they're severely under power, will have no bass or virtually no bass, and a little bit of bass they have will be muddy and soft sounding. So with both of those headphones, they actually have pretty good bass, they have pretty good slam, and pretty respectable sound. So that's what I'm going to say. This actually does a pretty respectable job, even with really hard to drive headphones like the HE6 and Susvara. Would I recommend this for those two headphones? No. I would say get yourself an amp with 3, 4, maybe even more watts per channel for those two headphones, but this one will do a respectable job. So say you just spent $6,000 on a Susvara and you don't have a DAC or amp, you've only got a couple $100 you can scrape up right now, or you're going to have to wait a long time to enjoy your headphone. Take a couple $100, use this, and you're going to get a respectable sound. No, not the potential of the Susvara, but you're going to get a pretty respectable sound out of it for a couple $100 while you wait and save up for something better with more power. Okay, I did compare this to a few of my amps I have laying around. I didn't have anything that was really an exact comparison at the exact price, but I compared it to what I had. So I started out by comparing this to the iFi Audio Zen DAC, and my Zen DAC is the original, which sold for, I think, $129. I've had it probably about 4 years. I'm not sure what the differences are in that there was a Zen DAC 2 and now a Zen DAC 3. I'm not sure what the differences are, but the Zen DAC 1 does have impressive sound in my opinion. Not the most powerful amp in it, but a really good DAC. So anyway, I compared this to the Zen DAC 1. And the sound was actually very similar. They're both a little on the warm side of neutral, very pleasant sounding. Advantages of the Zen DAC, it does have the bass boost button, but I never use it because it boosts the bass 12 decibels, and that's just way too much for me. I never boost a headphone more than like 3 decibels. In my opinion, if you need to boost your headphone 12 decibels in the bass department, you probably need a different headphone. You're a bass head and you don't have a bass head headphone if you need to boost it 12 decibels. So anyway, but similar sound to the Zen DAC, both nice and warm, very pleasant. I would say this maybe just has a touch more clarity than the Zen DAC. And this definitely has more power. It will definitely do a better job with something hard to drive like the Susvara or HE6, where the DAC will barely even bring the Susvara up to a respectable listening level, and it will have very little bass. So this will give you the ability to use harder to drive headphones than the DAC. Excuse me. Let me get a drink a second. I mowed 3 yards this evening and got dried out a little bit. So anyway, okay. So after my first impressions of this, there were a few comments that wanted to know how this compared to the Hi-Fi Man EF400. So I compared it, and I would say, and the EF400 does have an R2R DAC in it, where this is a Delta Sigma DAC. Okay, the EF400 is slightly warmer than this, slightly richer than this, and has a little more depth to the soundstage. And that, in my opinion, is because of the R2R DAC. And it definitely has more power. I think it's rated at 4 or 4.25 watts per channel. So the EF400 is a better option or a better choice for the HE6 and the Susvara. In my opinion, this is a little bit cleaner sounding than the EF400. And the big advantage this has over the EF400 is the EF400 only has one digital input, only USB, where this has 3. And the EF400 has no analog input. So I love the EF400, but that was my major complaint about it. Only one digital input and no analog input. So, like I said, it's a little bit richer, talking about the EF400, a little more power, but it is twice the price. It is $399. Okay, I also had someone ask me to compare this to the EF600 by Hi-Fi Man. The F600 does have the inputs and the outputs and that sort of thing like this does. It does have more power than this. Okay, but the difference between the EF600 and the EF400, the big difference is the 400 uses the Himalaya R2R DAC chips. The F600 uses the Himalaya Pro R2R DAC chips, and I actually prefer the original Himalaya chips in the EF400. The EF600, which I do like, I really like the EF600. It's a really nice amp DAC for the price of $649. Has a lot of power, once again, at least double the power of this, and a better choice for something really hard to drive like the HE6 or the Susvara. But where this does beat the HE6 is the HE6, the DAC. It has a really smooth sound, but it's also kind of soft in my opinion. It's a little bit too soft. Where this DAC in this is a little bit crisper and cleaner sounding to me. A little bit more detail. The Himalaya Pro DAC in the EF600 is just a little too mellow, a little bit too soft for my taste. Not bad, it's very pleasant to listen to, but this does just etch out a little more detail. It's, like I said, a little bit crisper sounding, a little more focused sound. The sound's just a little more focused. So this does beat out the EF600 in that respect. And once again, my opinion. Okay, for kicks, I compared this to my first ever headphone amp and DAC. And I bought my first serious set of headphones in 2012. That was the Hi-Fi Man HE500. And I already had my amp DAC because I used it with my speaker system. I had a Macintosh amp and a pair of Mirage OMD 28 speakers, and I was already using that amp DAC. Asked my DAC, I was running from my CD player and using that DAC and then into the big Macintosh amp. And so I already had it, and I'm thinking I bought that back in like maybe 2010, something like that. So anyway, it's a Benchmark DAC 1. Okay, when I bought the Benchmark DAC 1, which like I said was my primary amp DAC for several years, and all the way into the first few years of reviewing headphones, that was my primary DAC. That was my reference DAC, and I still really like it. Okay, back then, back like 2010, the Benchmark DAC 1 was rated, was given an A rating by Stereophile magazine. It's that good. Okay, but it is like 15 years old and it's a little outdated. So for kicks, I thought I'd compare this to the Benchmark DAC 1 that was no longer in production, and it was $999. So I wanted to see how a modern $210 DAC compared to a $1,000 DAC amp from 15 years ago, and it was actually pretty close. They didn't sound the same. There were some differences. The Benchmark was slightly warmer, slightly richer, and had a little more of an analog sound to it, where this has a little bit more of a digital sound. This was a little bit crisper and cleaner, but sounds more digital, where the Benchmark DAC 1 wasn't quite as focused. I'm talking just a couple percent, not a big difference, but it was a little richer, a little warmer, and just sounded a little more analog than this did. Where this does beat out the Benchmark DAC 1, that has, I think, 1.25 watts per channel, and does not do a very good job with the HE6SE or the Susvara. This does a better job with those hard to drive headphones. As far as, medium, hard to drive headphones like the Aria or the HE1000 or the Anandas, the Benchmark does fine. So anyway, but I was really surprised how well this had held up against a Stereophile Class A rated $1,000 amp DAC from 15 years ago. So did very well. You can definitely get more sound for your money now. Back then, I don't think you could touch any kind of amp DAC combination for $210. So anyway, and then the last thing I compared this to was just yesterday, or the day before, I got the FiiO K11 R2R combination amp DAC, which sells for $159. It's a little smaller than this, looks a little different, has a digital screen, has more features, but a little less power, but it is an R2R DAC, and it's only $159, which is unbelievable that you can now get an R2R DAC with an amp in it for $159. So I did a brief comparison, not very long, maybe a 15-20 minute comparison between this and the FiiO K11 R2R. And the differences are the K11 did sound slightly warmer. It sounded slightly richer, and the biggest difference was in the mid-range. The mid-range was definitely a little warmer, a little richer. I think the K11 had slightly more weight to the mid bass, and but where this had the advantages over the K11 was this did sound slightly cleaner, slightly more focused than the K11 with the R2R DAC. And that's usually the case. Delta Sigma DACs usually have a slightly cleaner, more focused sound, where R2R DACs are usually a little warmer, richer, a little more analog sounding, and the K11, I believe, has a little more soundstage depth than this does. Okay, the K11 I think is rated at 1.3 watts per channel, and I haven't had a chance yet to try it with the Susvara or the HE6, but my guess would be that this is going to do a better job with those because this is 2 watts per channel and that's 1.3. So I just got that in, and that probably will be my next review, will be my first impressions of the FiiO K11 R2R DAC and combination headphone amp. So, bottom line on this. This is simple, it's straightforward, it doesn't have fancy things like multiple digital filters that you can switch back and forth from. It doesn't have a screen, a digital screen, it doesn't have a remote, doesn't do anything fancy, but it's simple, it's straightforward, and provides excellent sound quality for the price, in my opinion. And I'm going to say it once again, I really like the large volume knob and the fact that it's non-linear, that it starts out real slow for sensitive headphones and then ramps up fast for, power hungry headphones. So, yeah, I really like this thing. At the price, I think it's a really good deal, really great sound. Like I said, nothing fancy, but really good sound. Nice aluminum case, it's not plastic, so yeah, it's a nice, and I think I hope I didn't forget to point out, but it does have a 4.4 millimeter connection for your headphones. I don't know if I mentioned that. I think I did, but I just want to make sure. It does have a balanced headphone output. So you've got your 6.3 and you got your 4.4 millimeter balance, just in case I forgot to mention that. So I'm going to wrap up this video. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up over 36.1 thousand members. And I'd like to see you all over there. Join up with us and get involved in the conversations. Once again, thanks for watching my video.